Hello, everybody. Welcome to Wholehearted Loving. I'm Stephanie.
Hi, I'm Georgiana.
Today we're going to talk about what to do when you don't know what to do. But before we do that, we're going to start with a body-based self-connection practice before we connect with each other and this podcast.
Yeah. So let us find connection with our bodies, whatever that means to you. For me, that means just bringing a little bit of movement, feeling my hands press into my thighs. That is one that often helps me really feel my body. And we're going to use the hands for this practice. So we can take the one hand and just hold the thumb of the other hand, and it can be with whatever pressure feels good for you. I'm just going to hold that and be here for one breath, one inhale, one exhale. You're going to follow your own pace and then just do that with the next 4 fingers. You can let your eyes be closed, or you can let your eyes specifically look for things. So you're using your eyes to orient, and you're using touch, and you bring awareness to your breath. Whatever way you want to use vision in this practice, you can. And after you've done that with each of your 5 fingers, the question will be, what's the next nice thing you could do? Or what's the next decent feeling thing you could do?
Topical.
So for me, there's some really fluffy white clouds outside, so I'm going to take a moment and just enjoy the sun shining on them.
I am holding my hands and stretching my calf and looking at a tree.
Nice.
Sometimes it's obvious what the next thing is. Like I started getting not a Charlie horse, but Charlie horse adjacent in my calf. She needs to be stretched. She needs maybe a magnesium. But sometimes it's not obvious.
No. And when it's not obvious, it's helpful to get into the practice of just do something and then pay attention with your body. Your body will let you know whether that was helpful or not helpful, or maybe neutral. And if you just string together enough of those moments where you just do the next helpful thing, or I've written down, I think in this episode, we're really going to address what's the next helpful thing to do, or the next productive thing to do, or the next soothing thing to do, or the next constructive thing to do. Or this one I really like is when you don't know how to answer that question, or you're in a really down and dark place. What's the next decent thing I could do for myself? And so I think being able to ask yourself these questions and just do that next thing is really helpful. Because I think a phrase that really helped me in tough times was that clarity comes through action.
Yes.
I used to think clarity came through mulling over things and thinking about things over and over and over again, and until I realized that's actually not what brings clarity, right? Action brings clarity. But doing what though? Sometimes, like you said, it's obvious, and sometimes it's not. And I know when we're in dark, heavier times where we're feeling down and maybe not great about ourselves or about our lives or about the situation, it can be challenging to think of what would feel good. I don't know what would feel good, right? And this sort of came about working with a client. I think she was in, just going through a really tough time, and like that felt like a big stretch, I think, for her mind at the time, like what would feel good or what's the next helpful thing. But we started experimenting with what's the next decent thing you could do for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And this sort of sounds like simple, but sometimes we need a lot of practice with this too, because we're used to making things big.
Yeah.
And then we're like, I don't know what the next thing is. But we started playing with, what if it's like to place your hand on your chest? Oh, okay, let me try that. And then we check in. Does that feel good, bad, neutral? And then we do the next decent thing. Sometimes it was, can I just feel my back against the wall? Okay. Oh yeah, that felt a little bit better. Okay, what's the next decent thing? Oh, to take a bite of my food. Great. Let's do that. Like, that's the level of simplicity we need to work with sometimes, depending on what kind of state we're in. Because I remember a time in my life where having a shower was a big deal, right? Eating the next meal was a big deal. And so if we're willing to let, like, oh, just taking a sip of water right now would be the next decent thing, that's helpful. Because not just the sip of water might be helpful, but I think on a subconscious level, we're telling our bodies, like, I'm caring for you. I'm bringing some intention into this moment, right? I'm still here trying to do something.
Yeah.
Right.
I can definitely identify a lot with the not knowing what would be helpful. And something I've discovered for myself is that opposites for me can be revealing. So if I can't tell what would be helpful, maybe I can imagine some things that would be very unhelpful. Like if I'm having a hard time, I don't know what to do next. Almost certainly I'm going to say, here's my silly example right now, putting together an IKEA shelf, may or may not be helpful in that situation. And then that might guide me to like, oh, having a sip of water might be good, or having a meal might be good, or giving myself some overwhelming task that would not be helpful will highlight for me what might be helpful.
Yeah. And sometimes like making food will feel like too big of a next step. Mm-hmm. So it might be, let's just walk to the kitchen.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That reminds me, there was a meme going around a while ago of a depressed person talking to their therapist about how it's too difficult to even make a sandwich. And the therapist is like, you can just eat the pieces. Like, you don't need to make a sandwich. You can just have the parts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's interesting because, I work with people who feel very overwhelmed and have a pattern of being hard on themselves and have a pattern of making things bigger than they need to and spending more time thinking about how something is hard than just going and doing it. And I get that. I've been in those phases in my life as well. And often, like, what I'll do is I'll ask them if they're open to just playing and seeing. And they're like, okay. And I'll ask them to look at something in their space that doesn't belong there, that needs to be taken back to some place where it belongs. And I'll ask them if they're open to doing that. They're like, yeah, okay. So then they get up and I'll ask them, like, can you pay attention to your feet as you're walking, just to feel your feet on the ground? And they take it to where it belongs and they put it there. And then they come back and I was like, how was that? Was that okay? Yeah, it was okay. Okay, are there like 3 other things you want to do that with? Okay. And they go do it. And then afterwards, we talk about how that felt. They're like, that felt pretty easy. But like with their own autopilot sort of brain, often they'll make that into something so big. Like, I have to clean the whole house. I have to, the whole place is in disarray. And they won't realize that, oh, I did 30 seconds of something. I actually had energy for that. Or they'll say, I'm so exhausted, which I'm not doubting anyone's exhaustion. But I just also know that often we have a little bit more energy than we think we do than we have, or whatever. We have more energy than we realize.
Yeah.
Right. And then they always feel good. They're like, oh, that made a difference.
Yeah.
Let me go put 5 other things away.
Yeah. This is like the path unveiling itself as it always does. Action leads us somewhere. You pick up the one thing, it'll lead you to want to maybe pick up another thing. And yeah, suddenly that energy appears. It's
Yeah.
generated.
So it's the just do something.
Yeah.
Right. And like if you're tired, this is the other thing I notice. If people are tired, they won't actually create a restful situation for themselves. They'll just sit and feel tired and then shame themselves for all the things they're not doing. So they're not doing the things, but they're also not getting rest. Right. So we've also had times where we're like, well, are you tired? Yeah. Okay. Well, would it feel good to lay down? Would that be the next decent thing? Okay. But isn't that kind of weird to lay down when we're talking? Not if it feels like it would feel decent for you. Or that's what we're practicing.
Yeah.
And they lay down, they're like, oh, this actually feels really nice. So you do know, you can discover what would be the next helpful thing to do.
Yeah. What do you think impedes people from finding the next helpful thing?
I think it's two big things, which, I mentioned earlier, which is thinking that the next thing has to be a huge thing, and thinking that it has to be the right thing.
The shoulds.
Yeah. And so it becomes more of this thinking task than just doing something and seeing how that feels. Right. So with someone, we practice stringing together, like, what's the next decent thing? And we might have done that 3 to 5 times. And all of a sudden, like each one of those things, she discovered, oh, that felt either nice or neutral. It didn't, like, we would ask every time, did that make you feel worse? And she's like, no, it didn't make me feel worse. Great. Then we're moving in that direction of doing things that help me feel better. Right.
Yeah.
And I use the word decent, meaning, like, what's the next thing you can do that doesn't cause you harm?
Yeah.
What's the next thing you can do that's not a bad, like, it doesn't, have a bad impact on you? It's not a terrible feeling thing.
Yeah. There's something here spiritually that's really about being with the present. When we're making things too big or filling our mind with shoulds, sometimes they're shoulds that we can immediately tackle that feel good, that are true. And often they're debilitating. They're either somebody else's agenda or an agenda we're setting for ourselves that doesn't align with what's actually present in the moment, in our bodies, in our energy, in our space. And I think it's so important to chunk these things down and be present and feel into what's next.
And I want to highlight that when we were working on this, like, what's the next decent thing to do? It was at a phase in, I've used this with many clients. It was a phase in their life where there were a lot of unknowns in their life, and they were facing some hard to feel things, some hard to accept things. And maybe there wasn't a clear answer in those realms what the next thing to do was. Or it was that they were trying to figure out what the next right thing to do was in this, like, really stressful area of their life. And they couldn't, and it just caused more and more panic and dysregulation. And we needed to practice, like, just putting that on hold for a moment of, like, we're probably not actually going to figure out the answer to that question today or right now. And it's not a life or death situation that you must find an answer for that situation right now. So let's see if we can shift the focus to just what is the next decent thing you could do right in this moment that has nothing to do with that other thing. And I think that's another thing for people to realize is change that will happen in your life when you're having a hard time. It's not always dealing with the big glaring thing that's the problem. Because in actuality, what's happening is you're so dysregulated that you can't actually think straight to solve that bigger problem. Yeah. And what we're trying to do is just bring a little bit more regulation to the system. So what would be the next decent feeling thing for your body? Yeah. And from that place, you can get more clarity to handle the other stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. This is more on the path reveals itself. Take small actions and things will become clear. But they won't become clear from sitting there and shooting yourself into oblivion.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Thanks.
practice with that. What's the next helpful thing, productive thing, soothing thing, decent thing, not horrible thing, constructive thing, whatever thing, right? And like, be willing to have those things be as simple as I'm going to stand up.
Yes.
Right? We have had people on our group calls feeling all sorts of miserable in their bodies, and we'll ask them like, you know, what do you imagine might feel like right now if you were to stand up? Are you open to that? They're like, okay. And they stand up, and then we ask them what they notice. Oh, I actually feel a lot better. Or when I stand up, it makes me also want to like move my hands in this way or feel my legs in this way. And then that makes me feel stronger. And that made that other feeling that was uncomfortable sort of soften a little bit. Right. So something as simple as standing up.
Yeah. These
Can make a
things are
difference.
microscopic but impactful
Mm-hmm.
in leading. Yeah. Thanks, Gigi.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else you want to say about this?
I want to also normalize when we need to like check out, you know, when we're exhausted and we're like, I just need to lay in bed. I
I
just
love
need
a
to
good
do
checkout.
nothing today.
Mm.
And so many people can like make themselves feel really bad about that.
Mm.
And so, yeah.
I was thinking about this the other day. So I now live in a quiet place. And that's so necessary for me. Like, I really need a lot of quiet to let clarity come, you know? And I think most of us don't have time or space to hear the whisper of intuition. Everything else is too loud, you know? It's not clear what needs to come next because there's 8,000 things banging up against our consciousness all the time. And there's no pause and there's no quiet space for people to hear that whisper.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really important thing to
Yeah.
cultivate.
Yeah. So when you feel the need to check out, binge watch something or whatever, I always suggest, can you just bring a little bit of awareness to it? Right. So the next decent thing might be, yeah, you are gonna, you know, when Netflix says, are you still here? You can say, yes, I am still here. And I'm going to feel my hand on the button when I press yes. Or
Yeah.
I'm going to like feel my head, my face on the pillow as I'm like sort of sprawled on the bed watching another episode of whatever it is. Right.
This is such a good example because I remember probably one of the first times I ever saw that message, I was like offended. You know, like, what are you suggesting, Netflix? You know, should I not still be here? And I have a friend who posted something about this on Facebook, being like, quit shaming me, Netflix. Yeah, I'm still here. So what? And this happened to me the other day. And I said out loud, I'm like, oh, yes, I'm still here. Not a hint of shame. I'm here on purpose. You know, I'm here for reasons.
Right. So when we can transform that feel sorry for myself checking out to, I'm going to bring some body awareness to this, and I'm going to see that this is meeting a need for rest.
Yeah.
And it's very different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. Thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm, you're welcome.
Have you got a body-based self-connection practice?
I think I'll stick to the theme of what's the next decent feeling thing for you to do when it comes to connecting with your body.
Stretches and yawns.
Mm-hmm. Mine is just feeling that pressure point behind the ears and adding a little bit of pressure there.
This leads to hand rolls and wrist rolls. And
Yeah,
arms.
and then I wanted to stretch my arms. Then I wanted to put my arms behind my head. Then I want, you know, it's neat because it's if you continue with, and then I wanted to, and then I wanted to, you're going to notice that a lot of things come naturally and intuitively, but we don't realize that, right?
We need to make the space. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of the things that's so beautiful about our live calls is that it is that quiet space for people to arrive in. And inevitably it ends up with a bunch of people yawning and falling asleep. And that's such a beautiful thing because they've made space for this rest and this self-connection that I think takes us to so many beautiful, important places in our lives if we make room for it.
Yeah, that was one of the big reasons why we wanted to create that space in the live calls, to like practice just paying attention to the body. And it's always so neat to see how impactful that hour chunk of time is for people. Right. And
Yeah.
what we do in that hour chunk, we don't do any particular thing for an hour. Like everything we do is actually quite short.
Mhm.
And like to be able to see the impact that that has on people and their bodies is really amazing.
For sure. When you look at kids moving through the world, their bodies are suggesting things to them and they're following through on it all the time, and we've just like conditioned that out by sitting in cubicles and whatever as adults. And
Mm-hmm.
there's so much information in here and movement and places to go and be and feel.
Yeah, we can learn a lot from children before they get conditioned to behave or whatever you want to call
Mm,
it.
yeah.
They're fully self expressed.
Yeah. And you can be too.
Yeah.
Yay. Okay. Well, thank you, Gigi. And we will see you guys next week. So, as always, please do like, follow, and subscribe. And if anything we've said here today has been helpful for you, please share with somebody that you care about. See you next time.
Bye.